In the ancient world, when the boundaries between the material and the spiritual were as thin as the morning mist over the Nile, the priests of Anubis guarded not only the secrets of death and rebirth, but also the mysteries of what could cloud or clarify the soul's journey. Among the most closely guarded teachings was the true nature of alcohol, its seductive allure, its hidden dangers, and its profound effects on the soul's connection to the divine. The story begins in the shadowed corridors of the Temple of Anubis, where a young initiate named Senmut was tasked with tending the sacred fires and preparing the offerings for the nightly rituals. Senmut was curious, eager, and restless, his heart filled with questions about the world beyond the temple walls. One evening, as he swept the floor near the storeroom, he discovered a sealed amphora, its surface etched with warnings in ancient script. The scent that escaped the vessel was sweet and sharp, unlike anything he had known. Drawn by curiosity, Senmut brought the amphora to the elder priest, whose eyes grew grave as he recognized the markings. "This is the water of forgetfulness," the elder whispered, "a gift and a curse from the gods. Few know its true power, and fewer still can bear its cost." He led Senmut to a hidden chamber where the walls were covered in faded paintings, scenes of feasts, ecstatic dances, and in the shadows figures lost in confusion and despair. The elder began to teach Senmut what had been passed down for generations, that alcohol known to the ancients as the spirit in the cup was both a bridge and a barrier. In the earliest days, the gods themselves had shown humanity how to ferment the grape and the grain to create a drink that could open the gates of perception and soften the edges of suffering. Used with reverence in sacred ritual and community celebration, alcohol could help dissolve the rigid boundaries of the ego, allowing the soul to glimpse the unity that underlies all things. But the priests of Anubis also knew that this gift was double-edged. The same drink that could open the heart to joy could, if abused, cloud the mind and weaken the will. The spirit in the cup was not merely a metaphor, but a literal force, a subtle entity that could attach itself to the drinker, feeding on their life energy and drawing them away from the path of awakening. The more one drank, the more the spirit took root, dulling the senses and binding the soul in chains of confusion. Senmut listened in awe as the elder described the hidden dangers that awaited those who used alcohol carelessly. The ancient texts spoke of the second death, a state in which the soul, having lost its clarity and strength, wandered aimlessly in the realms beyond, unable to find the light that would lead it home. The priests believed that every act, every thought, every substance taken into the body left an imprint on the soul, shaping its destiny in this life and the next. The elder showed Senmut a scroll written in the time of the first dynasties, its words trembling with warning. "Beware the cup that glitters in the torchlight, for within it swims the shadow of forgetfulness. Drink not to escape the world, but to remember the divine within. Let the cup pass your lips only in gratitude and never in longing or despair." The scroll described rituals for purifying the body and mind after drinking and prayers to Anubis for protection against the spirits that lurked in the wine. As Senmut learned, he began to see the world with new eyes. He noticed how the villagers who drank deeply at the festivals would sometimes become lost in laughter, only to wake the next day in sorrow and confusion. He saw how the elders who drank sparingly with prayers and offerings seemed to carry a lightness and peace that lasted long after the cup was empty. He realized that the true danger of alcohol was not in the drink itself, but in the intention and awareness with which it was consumed. The elder explained that in the mysteries of Anubis, every substance had its spirit, its own consciousness and will. Alcohol, when honored and understood, could be a teacher revealing hidden truths and helping to dissolve the barriers that separated the soul from the divine. But when taken without respect, or as an escape from pain, it became a thief, stealing clarity, draining energy, and leaving the soul vulnerable to forces that sought only to feed upon it. The priests had developed rituals to protect themselves and their community from these dangers. Before drinking, they would offer a portion of the wine or beer to the gods, asking for blessing and guidance. They would drink slowly in silence, or song, always mindful of the spirit in the cup. If someone drank too much and fell into confusion, the priests would gather around them, chanting prayers and burning sacred herbs to drive away the shadows and restore balance. Senmut was taught that the path of the soul was a journey of remembrance, a return to the divine source from which all life flows. Every act, every choice was a step on this path. Alcohol, like all things, could be a help or a hindrance, depending on the wisdom with which it was approached. The greatest danger was not intoxication itself, but the forgetfulness that followed the loss of the soul's connection to its own true nature. The elder concluded his teaching with a final warning. There are spirits in this world that hunger for the light of the soul. They cannot take it by force, but they can lure you into forgetfulness, into habits that weaken your will and cloud your vision. Alcohol is one of their favorite tools, for it opens the gates not only to joy, but to confusion and despair. Walk the path with eyes wide open, and let the light of Anubis guide you through the shadows. Senmut left the chamber changed. He understood now that every feast, every cup raised in celebration, was a moment of choice, a test of his awareness and his devotion to the path. He resolved to honor the spirit in the cup, to drink only in gratitude and with clear intention, and to help others remember the ancient truths that had been entrusted to him. Senmut's understanding deepened as the seasons turned and the temple's rituals unfolded beneath the watchful eyes of Anubis. The lessons of the elder priest echoed in his mind, shaping the way he viewed every gathering, every offering, every moment when the spirit in the cup was invoked. He saw how the villagers, in their longing for connection and relief from the burdens of daily life, turned to alcohol as both celebration and escape. Yet he also saw how easily the line between sacred use and careless indulgence could be crossed. During the great festivals, when the Nile's floodwaters receded and the harvest was gathered, the people would come together in joyful communion. Wine and beer flowed freely, songs rose into the night, and laughter echoed through the temple courtyards. In these moments, Senmut witnessed the positive side of alcohol, the loosening of rigid boundaries, the softening of old resentments, the sense of unity that blossomed when the cup was shared with gratitude and reverence. But as the night wore on, he also saw the shadows gather. Some would drink beyond their limits, their laughter turning to quarrels, their joy to regret. The next morning, the light in their eyes would be dimmed, Their memories clouded their spirits, heavy with the sense of loss they could not name. Senmut remembered the words of the elder. The spirit in the cup is a mirror. It will show you what you carry inside. If you drink in joy, it will amplify your joy. If you drink to forget, it will deepen your forgetfulness. He began to understand that alcohol was not inherently good or evil, but a force that magnified whatever was already present in the soul. When used in ritual with clear intention and communal support, it could open the heart and connect the drinker to the divine. But when used to numb pain or escape reality, it could trap the soul in cycles of confusion and longing, making it harder to remember the true purpose of life. Senmut sought guidance from the elder priest who shared more of the ancient teachings. The priests of Anubis believed that the soul was like a lamp shining with the light of the divine. Every thought, every feeling, every substance taken into the body could either brighten or dim that light. Alcohol, when used without awareness, created a veil between the soul and its source, making it harder to hear the voice of intuition, to feel the presence of the gods, to remember the lessons learned in dreams and visions. The elder spoke of the hidden dangers that awaited those who relied too heavily on alcohol. Over time, the soul's connection to the higher realms could weaken, leaving the individual vulnerable to the influence of lower spirits. Entities drawn to the energy of intoxication, feeding on the confusion and despair that followed. These spirits, the ancient texts warned, could not possess the soul outright, but they could whisper in the shadows, encouraging habits that led further and further from the path of awakening. Senmut listened with growing concern. He saw how some of the villagers, once strong and vibrant, had become hollow-eyed and withdrawn, their lives revolving around the next cup, the next escape. He recognized the signs of spiritual depletion, the loss of joy, the fading of dreams, the sense of being cut off from the world and from oneself. He understood now why the priests had guarded these teachings so carefully, why they had insisted on ritual and moderation, on gratitude and self-awareness. The elder taught him the rituals of purification, ways to cleanse the body and mind after drinking to restore balance and reconnect with the divine. These included fasting prayer, bathing in sacred waters, and burning incense to clear the subtle energies. He explained that the true power of these rituals lay not in the actions themselves, but in the intention behind them, the conscious choice to return to clarity, to honor the soul's journey, to seek forgiveness and renewal. Senmut began to share these teachings with others, gently guiding those who struggled with alcohol toward practices of mindfulness and self-care. He encouraged them to drink only in community, to set clear intentions before raising the cup, to pause and listen to the wisdom of their own hearts. He reminded them that every moment was an opportunity to choose the light, to remember the divine within, to walk the path of awakening with courage and humility. As he grew in wisdom, Senmut saw that the story of alcohol was not unique to Egypt. He heard tales from travelers of distant lands, where wine was offered to the gods in Greece, where sacred beers were brewed in Sumer, where shamans in the forests of the north used fermented drinks to journey between worlds. In every culture, the spirit in the cup was both honored and feared, recognized as a force that could open doors or close them depending on how it was approached. He realized that the teachings of Anubis were universal, rooted in the understanding that the soul's journey was a path of remembrance. a return to the source, a reawakening of the divine spark within. Alcohol, like all things, could be a stepping stone or a stumbling block, a teacher or a trap. The key was awareness to drink with gratitude, to honor the spirit in the cup, to remember the light that shone within every heart. Senmut's life became a living example of these truths. He was known for his kindness, his clarity, his ability to bring people together in celebration without losing sight of the sacred. He taught that joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain were all part of the soul's journey, and that the true measure of a life was not what one consumed, but what one remembered, what one gave, what one became. The elders of the temple watched with approval as Senmut grew into his role as teacher and guide. They knew that the ancient truths were safe in his hands, that he would pass them on to future generations with the same care and reverence with which they had been entrusted to him. And so, the wisdom of Anubis endured a living current, flowing through the ages, reminding all who would listen that the soul's light could never be extinguished, only hidden, and that every cup raised in awareness was a step closer to home. As Senmut's reputation grew, seekers from distant villages and even foreign lands began to arrive at the temple, drawn by stories of the priest, who understood both the light and shadow of the spirit in the cup. They brought with them their own customs, their own rituals, and their own questions. Some came hoping for a blessing that would allow them to drink without consequence. Others sought healing from the wounds that careless indulgence had left upon their souls. Senmut welcomed all with the same gentle presence. He listened to their stories, their confessions, their hopes and regrets. He saw that for many alcohol had become a substitute for connection, a way to fill the emptiness left by lost loneliness or the burdens of daily toil. He understood that the longing for transcendence, for a taste of the divine, was universal, but that the path to true awakening required more than the fleeting comfort of intoxication. He began to teach the deeper mysteries of Anubis, revealing that the soul's thirst could never be quenched by physical means alone. The cup you seek, he would say, is already within you. The nectar of the gods flows not from the vine or the grain, but from the heart that remembers its own divinity. He guided his students in practices of meditation, breathwork, and prayer, helping them to awaken the inner wellspring of joy and peace that no substance could provide. Senmut also addressed the wounds that alcohol had left: broken families, lost opportunities, spirits dimmed by years of forgetfulness. He taught that healing began with honesty, to see clearly the effects of one's choices to forgive oneself, and others to seek reconciliation and renewal. He reminded his students that the gods did not judge, but watched with compassion, always ready to guide the soul back to the path of remembrance. The rituals Senmut shared were simple but powerful. Before any communal feast, he would lead a prayer of gratitude, acknowledging the spirit in the cup and asking for clarity and protection. He encouraged moderation, teaching that the first sip should be taken in silence with a blessing for all present. If someone chose not to drink, their choice was honored as a sign of strength, not shame. When someone faltered, the community gathered to support them, offering understanding rather than condemnation. Over time, the temple became known as a place of transformation. Those who arrived burdened by addiction or despair often left renewed their spirits rekindled by the wisdom and compassion they had found. Some chose to abstain from alcohol altogether, dedicating themselves to the service of others. Others learned to use the spirit in the cup as a tool for ritual and celebration, never forgetting the lessons of balance and awareness. Senmut continued to explore the ancient texts, seeking ever deeper understanding. He discovered stories of sages and mystics who had used wine and other substances to enter altered states of consciousness, to commune with the gods, to receive visions and prophecies. But in every story, the key was always the same: intention, preparation, and respect. The greatest dangers arose not from the substances themselves, but from ignorance, arrogance, and the desire to escape, rather than to awaken. He also learned of those who had fallen to the shadow side of the cup sorcerers and false priests, who used alcohol to manipulate others, to summon spirits for selfish gain, to cloud the minds of the vulnerable. The ancient warnings were clear: the spirit in the cup could open doors to both light and darkness, and only those guided by wisdom and humility could walk the path safely. Senmut's teachings began to spread beyond the temple, carried by travelers and pilgrims to distant lands. In some places, his words were welcomed. In others, they were met with suspicion or ridicule. Yet the seeds he planted took root in unexpected ways. New rituals emerged, blending the wisdom of Anubis with the traditions of other cultures. Communities began to gather not only for feasting, but for healing, reflection, and remembrance. In his own life, Senmut found that the more he gave, the more he received. The light within him grew brighter, his dreams more vivid, his sense of connection to the divine ever deeper. He saw that the soul's journey was not about avoiding pleasure or denying the gifts of the earth, but about learning to use every experience as a step toward greater awareness and love. He continued to remind his students that the true cost of careless drinking was not measured in lost days or broken promises, but in the dimming of the soul's light. Every moment of forgetfulness, he said, is a moment lost to the dance of awakening, but every moment of remembrance, every act of gratitude, every choice made in awareness restores the soul's radiance and brings you closer to home. As the years passed, Senmut grew old, his hair silver as the moon, his eyes bright with the wisdom of 1,000 dawns. The temple flourished, its halls filled with laughter and song, its altars adorned with offerings of gratitude and hope. The spirit in the cup was no longer feared or worshipped, but honored as a teacher, a reminder of the delicate balance between pleasure and purpose, between the joys of the world and the longing for the divine. And so the story continued, woven into the fabric of the community, passed from elder to child, from teacher to seeker, from the heart of one who remembered to the heart of one who was ready to awaken. As the cycles of the moon marked the passing of years, Senmut's wisdom became legend, and the temple of Anubis a beacon for those seeking not only ritual but true transformation. The lessons of alcohol and the soul, once whispered in secret, began to ripple outward, touching the lives of people far beyond the temple's sandstone walls. Senmut understood that the real challenge was not simply to teach moderation or to warn against excess, but to help each soul remember its own sacred purpose. He saw that the spirit in the cup was merely a symbol for the greater mystery, the eternal dance between forgetting and remembering, between the pull of the world and the call of the divine. In every feast, Every gathering, every solitary night by the fire, the choice was the same. Would one use the gifts of the earth to awaken or to fall deeper into sleep? He watched as some of his students grew into wise leaders themselves, carrying the ancient teachings into new lands and new generations. They adapted the rituals to the needs of their people, blending the wisdom of Anubis with the customs of distant tribes, the prayers of foreign tongues. In every place they found the same longing, the same questions. How do we celebrate without losing ourselves? How do we honor pleasure without becoming its slave? How do we keep the soul's light burning bright in a world so full of distraction and desire? Senmut taught that the answer was always to return to the heart, to the quiet center where the soul's true voice could be heard. He encouraged his students to cultivate practices of stillness and reflection, to greet each day with gratitude, to end each night with a prayer of remembrance. He reminded them that the path was not about perfection, but about presence, to notice when the spirit in the cup began to cloud the mind, to pause and choose again, to forgive oneself, and begin anew. He also spoke of the deeper dangers that alcohol could bring, not only to the individual but to families, communities, and even entire nations. He saw how careless drinking could breed violence, how forgetfulness could spread like a shadow, turning celebration into sorrow, connection into isolation. He warned that when the soul's light was dimmed, in many the world itself grew darker, and the forces of confusion and despair found fertile ground. Yet Senmut never preached fear. Instead, he offered hope, a vision of a world where every cup was raised in gratitude, every feast a celebration of life's sacredness, every gathering an opportunity to remember the divine spark within. He taught that the soul's journey was long, and that every stumble, every mistake, was simply another chance to learn to grow, to return to the path of awakening. He shared stories from the ancient texts, tales of kings and beggars, priests and wanderers, each facing their own trials, each given the choice to use the gifts of the earth wisely or to be consumed by them. Some found wisdom in time. Others wandered for lifetimes before remembering. In every story, the gods watched with patience and compassion, always ready to guide the soul home when it was ready to listen. Senmut's own journey was not without struggle. There were times when he too felt the pull of forgetfulness, the temptation to lose himself in pleasure or pride. But each time he returned to the teachings of Anubis, to the rituals of purification, to the simple act of lighting a lamp in the darkness and remembering the light within. He learned that humility was the greatest shield, and that true strength lay not in resisting temptation, but in choosing love and awareness again and again. As his hair turned white and his steps grew slow, Senmut gathered his students for one final teaching beneath the temple's oldest sycamore. He spoke of the cycles of life and death, of the soul's journey through many worlds, of the promise that no light was ever truly lost. He reminded them that the spirit in the cup was only one of many tests they would face, and that the greatest gift they could offer the world was their own awakened presence. He blessed each one, placing his hand upon their brow, whispering words of remembrance and hope. He asked them to carry the teachings forward, to share them not as rules or warnings, but as living wisdom born of love and experience. He told them that the world would always offer distractions, always tempt the soul to forget, but that the light within was stronger than any shadow. and that every act of remembrance was a victory for the divine. That night, as the stars shimmered above the Nile and the temple's lamps flickered in the breeze, Senmut sat alone in the sanctuary, his heart filled with peace. He knew that his work was done, that the seeds he had planted would grow in their own time, in their own way. He offered a final prayer to Anubis, thanking the great guardian for his guidance, his patience, his unwavering love. The next morning, the priests found Senmut in quiet meditation, a gentle smile on his lips, the light of dawn illuminating his face. They knew that he had crossed the threshold, that his soul had returned to the source from which all things come. They mourned his passing, but celebrated his life, knowing that his teachings would endure a beacon for all who sought the path of remembrance. And so the wisdom of alcohol and the soul, the ancient truths and hidden dangers, the real spiritual cost, and the promise of awakening continued to flow through the generations. The story of Senmut became legend, a reminder that every cup, every choice, every breath was a step on the journey home, a journey guided by love, by awareness, and by the eternal light within. Long after Senmut's passing, the legacy of his teachings continued to ripple outward, shaping the lives of those who remembered and those who had yet to awaken. The Temple of Anubis remained a place of pilgrimage not only for those seeking ritual or healing, but for any soul longing to understand the true cost and secret potential of the spirit in the cup. The elders who succeeded Senmut honored his memory by living his wisdom, embodying the balance between celebration and sobriety, between the pleasures of the world and the clarity of the soul. The story of Senmut was told and retold each generation, adding its own insights, each teacher adapting the lessons to the needs of their time. Some spoke of the dangers of excess, warning that even the smallest act of forgetfulness could open the door to confusion and despair. Others focused on the path of gratitude, teaching that every cup raised in awareness could be a prayer, every feast an act of devotion, and every gathering an opportunity to remember the divine spark in all. The rituals Senmut had taught became woven into the fabric of daily life. Before each meal, a moment of silence was observed, a prayer of thanks offered for the gifts of the earth and the presence of the spirit in the cup. Festivals were marked not only by music and laughter, but by shared stories of awakening and remembrance. When someone struggled with the shadow side of alcohol, the community gathered to support them, offering compassion rather than judgment, hope rather than shame. In the quiet hours before dawn, the priests would gather in the inner sanctuary, lighting lamps and chanting prayers to Anubis. They asked for guidance and protection, for the strength to walk the path of remembrance, for the wisdom to use the gifts of the world in service of the soul's awakening. They remembered Senmut's words, "The true measure of a life is not what you consume, but what you remember, what you give, what you become." Travelers who visited the temple carried these teachings with them, sharing the wisdom of Anubis in distant lands. Some brought back stories of other traditions of shamans who used sacred brews to journey between worlds, of monks who abstained from all intoxicants to keep their minds clear, of healers who taught that every substance could be medicine or poison depending on the heart of the one who used it. In every place, the same questions echoed. How do we celebrate without losing ourselves? How do we honor the gifts of the earth without becoming their slaves? How do we keep the soul's light burning bright in a world full of distraction and desire? The elders taught that the answer was always the same: to return again and again to the quiet center within, to listen for the voice of the soul, to honor the spirit in the cup with gratitude and awareness, to forgive oneself for every stumble and to begin anew. They reminded the people that the journey was long, that awakening was a spiral, not a straight line, and that every act of remembrance, no matter how small, was a victory for the light. As centuries passed, the world changed. New rulers came and went. New gods were worshipped. New customs arose. Yet the wisdom of Senmut endured, finding new forms, new languages, new expressions. In times of peace, it was celebrated in song and story. In times of darkness, it was whispered in secret, a lamp in the night. Always it called to those who were ready to awaken to remember to walk the path of the soul with courage and love. In the end, the teachings of alcohol and the soul were not about prohibition or indulgence, but about presence. They were a reminder that every moment, every choice, every cup was sacred, a chance to remember the divine within and to honor the journey home. The spirit in the cup, like all things, was a teacher offering lessons in joy and sorrow, in forgetting and remembering, in the delicate art of living with an open heart. And so the story continues, as it always has and always will. The temple of Anubis stands as a symbol of the eternal dance between shadow and light, between the pleasures of the world and the longing for the divine. The lamp of remembrance burns on guiding every soul who seeks the truth, who honors the spirit in the cup, and who dares to awaken the light within.